At David Harlow's funeral, they whispered about carving up his empire. I stood in silence. Knowing a secret none of them did, I owned 51% of the company. They thought they'd fired me. Next Monday, they'd find out who was really in charge. The board members sat in the front row, their grief as manufactured as their Botox smiles. They were already calculating their windfall, dividing territories like vultures over carrion. What they didn't know was that 3 days before his death, David had signed everything over to me. The papers were sealed, notarized, and waiting in my lawyer's safe. My name is Madison Cole, and I've spent the last 7 years being underestimated by every suit in this godforsaken company. Standing here in St. Augustine Cathedral in Ravenwood, Illinois, watching them perform their grief like actors in a poorly rehearsed play, I almost wanted to laugh. The Gothic arches stretched above us, casting long shadows across the mahogany casket where David Harlow lay. He was the only one who ever saw what I was capable of. The board of directors occupied the front pews like royalty holding court. Richard Brennan dabbed at dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Patricia Morse clutched her pearls, whispering to Janet Sullivan about quarterly projections. Bryce Dalton, our chief operating officer, hadn't even bothered to remove his Bluetooth earpiece. They were already dividing David's legacy among themselves, calculating stock options and corner offices before his body was even cold. I stood 3 rows back, in my simple black dress from Nordstrom Rack, invisible to them as always. The strategic planning director who David kept around for reasons they never quite understood. They tolerated me because David insisted, but they never respected me, never invited me to their golf outings or their wine tastings in the Hamptons. I was furniture to them, useful but ultimately replaceable. The priest droned on about David's charitable contributions and his dedication to community service. True enough, but they didn't know the David who stayed until 11:30 p.m. reviewing my proposals, who taught me to read between the lines of financial statements, who showed me where bodies were buried in corporate America. 3 weeks ago, when the doctors told him the stroke had damaged too much, when they said he had days not months, David called me to his hospital room at 2:45 a.m. "Madison," he'd said, his voice barely a whisper, half his face frozen. "They're going to destroy everything we built. Brennan's already talking to private equity firms. Dalton wants to strip the company for parts." His good hand gripped mine with surprising strength. "I won't let that happen." That's when he told me about the transfer. 51% of his shares moved into a trust with my name on it. The papers were already drawn up by his personal attorney, someone the board didn't even know existed. We signed them right there in the hospital room, with 2 nurses as witnesses. David had been planning this for months, he said, ever since his first mini-stroke in January. He knew his time was limited. He knew the vultures were circling. "Let them think they've won," he'd instructed, his eyes sharp despite the morphine drip. "Don't reveal anything until the moment is right. They'll show their true colors when they think no one's watching. Document everything." Now, as the funeral mass continued, I felt the weight of that secret like armor beneath my skin. The share transfer documents were locked in a safe deposit box at First National, with copies secured by Emily Vargas, the best corporate litigation attorney in Chicago. The board didn't even know the transfer had happened. David's public will, the one they'd all seen, left his shares to a charitable trust they controlled. They had no idea a private codicil superseded everything. Bryce Dalton turned in his pew. Catching my eye, he smirked, that little dismissive expression I'd seen 1,000 times in conference rooms. Next week, he'd told his assistant within my earshot, they were restructuring the strategic planning department. My department, my termination papers were probably already drafted. I kept my face neutral, grieving, appropriate. Inside, I was counting down the days. They thought they were predators, but they didn't realize they were about to become prey. David's empire wasn't theirs to carve up. It was mine to protect, mine to wield, mine to use as a weapon against every single one of them who'd dismissed and diminished me for 7 long years. The priest called for the final blessing. We stood, heads bowed in false reverence. Patricia Morse was already texting her lawyer. Richard Brennan checked his Rolex twice. They couldn't wait to get to the reception at the Ravenwood Country Club, where they'd toast to new beginnings and expanded portfolios. Let them celebrate, I thought, following the casket out into the gray February morning. Let them think they've won. Monday's board meeting would be very different than they imagined. They'd learn what David knew all along: the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the underestimated ones, were the most dangerous of all. 1 week after the funeral, I received the call at 9:15 a.m. sharp. Madison, the board would like to see you in conference room A. Bryce Dalton's assistant didn't even try to hide the satisfaction in her voice. I'd been expecting this moment since I saw the calendar invite mysteriously appear for a strategic planning review, corporate speak for execution. I chose my outfit carefully that morning, not the power suit that might suggest I knew what was coming, but a modest blue dress that said I still believed I had a future here. I wanted them to think I was walking in blind, hopeful, maybe even prepared to present new initiatives for the quarter. The manila folder I carried contained fake proposals I'd never implement, charts and graphs for projects that would never see daylight. Conference room A was the killing floor, the place where careers went to die. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked downtown Ravenwood, and the long obsidian table could seat 20 but today held only 5. The entire board had assembled for my termination, an honor usually reserved for C-suite executives. They wanted to savor this moment. Madison, please sit. Richard Brennan gestured to the chair at the far end, the one they always reserved for the accused. I sat down carefully, placing my folder on the table with slightly trembling hands, a performance worthy of an Oscar. I'm sure you're wondering why we've called you here, Patricia Morse began, her voice dripping with false sympathy. She was wearing her pink Chanel suit, the one she always wore for firings. As you know, with David's passing, we're entering a new phase for the company. A leaner phase, Bryce interjected, not even pretending to be subtle. We've been reviewing all departments, looking for redundancies, inefficiencies. I nodded, playing my part. I understand. I've actually prepared some proposals for streamlining our strategic planning processes. That won't be necessary, Janet Sullivan cut me off, sliding a packet across the table. We're eliminating the strategic planning department entirely. Your position is being terminated, effective immediately. I let my mouth fall open slightly, let my eyes widen. Inside, I was memorizing every smirk, every satisfied glance they exchanged. Brennan was already checking his phone. Morse was examining her manicure. They thought this was over. I don't understand, I managed, injecting just the right amount of shock into my voice. My performance reviews have been excellent. David always said, David's not here anymore, Bryce said flatly. And frankly, Madison, we never understood why he insisted on keeping your department, strategic planning. We have consultants for that. McKinsey, Bain, real strategists, not— He gestured vaguely at me. Whatever it is you've been doing. The severance package was insulting. 2 weeks' pay, COBRA coverage for 30 days, and a non-disclosure agreement that would prevent me from ever speaking about the company's internal operations. They wanted me silenced and gone. You'll need to surrender your badge and laptop to security, Patricia added. They're waiting outside to escort you to your office. You have 30 minutes to pack your personal items. I stood slowly, picking up the unopened severance packet. My hands weren't trembling anymore. That performance was over. Thank you for the opportunity to work here, I said quietly. I learned so much from all of you. The double meaning sailed right over their heads. Brennan was already pulling up something on his laptop. Morse had turned to whisper something to Sullivan. Only Bryce watched me, and the satisfaction on his face was absolute. Oh, Madison, he called as I reached the door. The executive parking lot is off limits now. Make sure you remove your car within the hour. I turned back, gave them all a small nod. Of course, I understand my place now. Security was indeed waiting. 2 guards I'd known for years who couldn't meet my eyes. The walk to my office was deliberately humiliating, past the cubicles where my former colleagues pretended not to stare. Some looked sympathetic. Others relieved it wasn't them. A few were already eyeing my office space. I packed slowly, methodically, a few personal photos, my Boston fern, the coffee mug David had given me that said, "World's Most Adequate Strategist," his idea of a joke. I left the files, the proposals, 5 years of work that they'd probably shred without reading. None of it mattered anymore. That evening, the photos appeared on Bryce's Instagram. The entire board at Morton's Steakhouse, champagne flutes raised, celebrating their new streamlined structure. Patricia had posted on LinkedIn about exciting changes and dynamic new directions. They were so confident, so utterly certain they'd won. I sat in my apartment, laptop open, watching their social media parade. Emily Vargas had texted earlier. They took the bait. I'd responded with a simple hook, line, and sinker. The severance packet remained unopened on my kitchen counter. I wouldn't sign it. I wouldn't take their insulting money or accept their gag order. In 72 hours, when the markets opened Monday morning, they'd understand why. For now, let them celebrate. Let them toast to their victory. Let them think the mouse had been dismissed and the cats could play. The last photo Bryce posted at 11:47 p.m. showed him sitting in David's old chair, feet up on the executive desk. The caption read, "New era, new leadership, watch this space." Oh, I would be watching. They all would be watching. They just didn't know they'd be watching their own demise. The safety deposit box at First National Bank felt heavier than it should have as I lifted it onto the viewing room table. Inside, wrapped in waterproof plastic, lay the documents that would change everything. I spread them out carefully, share transfer certificates, notarized signatures, David's medical evaluation confirming mental competency, and the crown jewel, the video recording of the signing on an encrypted USB drive. Back in my apartment, I opened the wall safe hidden behind a terrible reproduction of Monet's water lilies, a housewarming gift from an ex-boyfriend that finally proved useful. Inside were more weapons, 7 years of meticulously documented irregularities, offshore accounts in the Caymans that Brennan thought were invisible, the kickback scheme Patricia ran with our supposed independent auditors, Bryce's creative interpretation of expense reports that funded his mistress's Miami condo. David had taught me to watch, to listen, to document. "Information is ammunition," he'd said once, 3 years ago over whiskey in his office. "Never fire until you have enough to win the war, not just the battle." My phone buzzed. Emily Vargas. "Can you meet me at my office tomorrow at 7 a.m.?" she asked. "We need to discuss strategy." Emily's office occupied the 42nd floor of the High Ridge Tower, all glass and steel with a view that stretched to Lake Michigan. She was already there when I arrived, immaculate in a black power suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, reviewing documents with the intensity of a surgeon. "Madison," she said without looking up. "Sit. Coffee's fresh." I poured myself a cup and waited. Emily never rushed, never showed her hand early. It's why she'd never lost a corporate lawsuit in 15 years. "The transfer is bulletproof," she finally said. "David was clever. He structured it through a Delaware trust, filed it with the SEC 3 weeks before his death, had 3 independent physicians certify his mental capacity. They can challenge it, but they'll lose." "They will challenge it," I said. "Oh, absolutely. But that's when we countersue." She slid a folder across her desk. "Breach of fiduciary duty. I've had my team reviewing the company's SEC filings for the past 5 years. Your board has been busy. Shell companies, related party transactions, executive compensation that would make a pharma CEO blush. David documented everything, didn't he?" I nodded. He knew this day would come. Smart man. Now, let's discuss phase 1. We spent the next 3 hours building our war plan. Emily had already lined up a judge for an emergency injunction if needed. Her contacts at the Wall Street Journal were ready for a story about corporate governance gone wrong. She'd even identified which board members would flip first when pressured. Janet Sullivan had the most to lose, with her husband's political campaign ramping up. "I need you to stay completely dark until Monday," Emily instructed. No contact with anyone from the company. Let them think you've retreated to lick your wounds. I've arranged a temporary office for you here in High Ridge. Suite 3900. Officially. It's leased to one of my shell companies. You can work from there. Suite 3900 was compact but perfect. A corner office with secure internet, a small conference room, and most importantly, complete anonymity. I spent the rest of the week there, building my intelligence network. Former employees who'd been wronged, current staff who were fed up, vendors who'd been strong-armed, they all had stories, and they all wanted someone to listen. Marcus Thompson, a former CFO who'd been forced out for questioning suspicious transactions, provided the motherlode. I kept copies of everything, he said over secure phone. Every email, every memo, every modified spreadsheet. They destroyed my career, but I knew someday someone would need this. By Friday evening, I had 73 gigabytes of evidence. Emily's forensic accountants had identified $47 million in questionable transactions. The SEC would have a field day. But my favorite discovery came from Bryce's own assistant, who'd reached out through LinkedIn under a fake profile. She was tired of his abuse, his demands, his wandering hands. She forwarded me an email chain where Bryce explicitly discussed selling the company's AI division to a Chinese competitor, a clear violation of his fiduciary duty and possibly national security regulations. That night, I stood in my new office, looking out at Ravenwood's glittering skyline. Somewhere out there, the board was probably planning Monday's agenda. They'd announce my termination formally, redistribute my responsibilities, maybe even toast to their newfound freedom from David's pet project. I opened my laptop and reviewed the presentation Emily and I had prepared. Slide 1 was simple. Ownership structure of Harlow Industries, effective immediately. Slide 2 would show my 51% stake. Slide 3 would be their termination notices. David's voice echoed in my memory from that hospital room. Let them think they've won. Madison. Overconfidence is the greatest weakness of small minds with big egos. I closed the laptop and prepared for the weekend. 2 more days of silence, of letting them bask in their perceived victory. Monday morning at 8 sharp, they'd learn what David had known all along. The most dangerous person in any boardroom isn't the loudest or the most powerful. It's the one taking notes, gathering evidence, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The war was about to begin, and I had already won. They just didn't know it yet. The first sign of trouble came on Saturday morning at 6:45 a.m., when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check the company Slack. A friend. I opened my laptop and logged into my personal account, which still had access to several public channels. An oversight in their rush to exile me. The general channel was in chaos. Someone had leaked news of my termination, but more importantly, they'd leaked Bryce's plans to sell off the AI division. The employees were furious. That division employed 300 people, some of whom had turned down offers from Google and Microsoft to stay with David's vision. The leak had come from someone inside Friday's board meeting, not my doing, which meant the board was already fracturing. By noon, the damage control had begun. Patricia Morse sent a company-wide email about restructuring for growth and strategic realignment. She assured everyone that no major asset sales were planned. It was the first lie of many to come. Bryce was less subtle. According to my sources, he'd called an emergency Saturday meeting with the senior management team, demanding to know who'd leaked the information. He'd actually made them surrender their phones, had Et scan their emails. The paranoia was setting in exactly as Emily had predicted. They're scared, she told me over our encrypted call that afternoon. Scared people make mistakes. Keep watching. Sunday brought escalation. Richard Brennan was spotted at the office at 5 a.m., boxes in hand. He was moving into David's office, couldn't even wait until Monday's official announcement. The security guard who texted me the photo added, "He's already redecorating," threw out Mr. Harlow's awards. That same morning, a different kind of news broke. Marcus Thompson, the former CFO I'd been in contact with, had reached out to a Bloomberg reporter. He didn't reveal everything. We were saving that ammunition. but he'd hinted at governance concerns and questionable dealings within Harlow Industries' board. The story wouldn't run until Monday, but Bloomberg had called the company for comment. The panic was palpable even from my distance. Janet Sullivan sent an encrypted message to the entire board, which my IT contact forwarded to me. Emergency meeting tomorrow at 7 a.m. We need unified response to press. No comments until we align. But the most beautiful development came at 9:20 p.m. Sunday night. Bryce Dalton, in his arrogance and desperation, made a fatal error. He sent an email to his contact at Crimson Capital, the Chinese firm interested in our AI division. My source, his long-suffering assistant, forwarded it immediately. Despite minor internal turbulence, the deal remains on track. With Madison Cole eliminated and David's shares now under board control, we can expedite the transfer, proposing $40 million for the complete package, including all patents and personnel contracts. Need commitment by end of week to prevent further deterioration of situation. Emily called me within minutes of receiving the forward. This is conspiracy to commit corporate espionage. The DOJ will have a field day. He just handed us a nuclear weapon. Not yet, I said. Let him dig deeper. As Sunday turned to Monday at midnight, I sat in my dark apartment, watching the city sleep. In 7 hours, the board would gather for their emergency meeting. In 8 hours, they'd formally announce my termination and their new leadership structure. In 9 hours, Emily would file our first salvo with the Delaware Court of Chancery. My phone lit up with messages from employees, vendors, even competitors who'd heard rumors. The financial press was circling like sharks. Someone had leaked that David's will was being contested. Not true. But the board didn't know that. They thought I was behind it all, pulling strings from the shadows. They were half right. I was pulling strings, but not the ones they suspected. The real puppet show hadn't even begun. At 3 a.m., unable to sleep, I reviewed the email chain one more time. Bryce had now committed federal crimes in writing. Patricia's Cayman accounts had received another deposit just yesterday. She was liquidating assets, preparing to run. Brennan had booked a one-way ticket to Switzerland for the following week. Rats fleeing a sinking ship, except they didn't realize they were already trapped in the hull. Emily had stationed process servers at every exit of the Harlow Industries building. The moment the board meeting concluded, they'd be served with notice of my ownership claim and a cease and desist order preventing any asset sales, terminations, or major corporate actions. The Delaware judge had agreed to an emergency hearing for Tuesday morning. But my favorite preparation was the presentation I'd asked Emily to arrange. Every major shareholder, every institutional investor, would receive a package at 9:30 a.m. Monday morning, inside evidence of the board's malfeasance, my ownership documents, and a simple message: new management arriving soon. Your investments are protected. At 4 a.m., I finally tried to sleep, but my phone buzzed one last time. It was from a number I didn't recognize, but the message made me smile. Ms. Cole, this is Victoria Hale from Caldwell Capital. We've been monitoring the situation at Harlow Industries with great interest. I believe we should talk. Monday, 10 a.m., if you're available. The board's meeting ends at 9:30. Doesn't it? Perfect timing. She knew, somehow. Victoria Hale already knew everything. The institutional investors were already choosing sides, and they were choosing mine. I set my alarm for 6 a.m. and finally closed my eyes. In a few hours, the empire would strike back. The board thought they were playing checkers while I'd been setting up a chessboard. They were about to learn that in corporate warfare, the first casualty is always hubris. Tomorrow, their paper kingdom would burn, and from its ashes, David's true legacy would rise. With me at its helm, Victoria Hale commanded attention without demanding it. When I walked into Caldwell Capital's conference room at 10 a.m. sharp on Monday, she was standing at the window wall, watching the city below with the stillness of a predator surveying territory. Her silver hair was pulled into a severe bun. Her charcoal suit likely cost more than most people's cars. And when she turned to face me, her gray eyes held the kind of intelligence that had built and destroyed Fortune 500 companies. Madison Cole, she said, Not a greeting, but a statement. 51% owner of Harlow Industries as of 9:47 this morning when the Delaware filing went public. Sit. The conference table was already laid out with documents, financial statements, analyst reports, my company's entire anatomy dissected and displayed. Your board is in chaos, Victoria continued, pouring coffee from a crystal carafe. Brennan tried to call an emergency shareholder vote 15 minutes ago. He was quite upset to learn he no longer has the authority. Morse is with her lawyers. Dalton. She smiled coldly. Dalton is about to discover the FBI received an interesting tip about foreign asset sales. You move fast, I said. I move first, she corrected. Caldwell Capital controls 28% of your non-controlling shares. Combined with your 51%, we have 79%, more than enough to do whatever needs doing. She slid a proposal across the table. Here's my offer. Caldwell will publicly support your takeover, provide bridge financing if needed, and help stabilize the stock price. In return, we want 3 board seats and a clear 90-day plan to restore profitability. And if I refuse? Victoria's smile was razor sharp. Then we sell our shares into the market chaos. The stock crashes, and you'll own 51% of Rubble. Your choice. I picked up the proposal, scanning the terms. They were aggressive but fair. Victoria wanted returns, not control. 2 board seats, I countered, and the 90-day plan includes removing all current board members. Including Janet Sullivan, her husband's Senate campaign makes her politically connected. Especially Sullivan. She's been siphoning funds through her husband's campaign consultants. Victoria's eyes glinted with approval. You've done your homework. 2 seats. But I choose who fills them, and I want Brennan prosecuted, not just removed. He's been shorting the company's stock through offshore accounts, betting against his own firm. Deal. We shook hands, her grip firm as iron. The board doesn't know yet, she said. But I've called an emergency shareholder meeting for Wednesday. Every major institutional investor will attend. You'll present your vision, and we'll vote. It'll be a formality. But theaters must have their performances. She handed me another folder. My analysts worked all weekend. Your company is bleeding $3 million a week through inefficiencies and corruption. The AI division Dalton wanted to sell. It's actually worth $200 million, not $40. The patents alone could license for $20 million annually. David knew, I said quietly. David Harlow was smarter than they gave him credit for. Choosing you as his successor proves it. Victoria stood. Meeting ending. My lawyers will coordinate with Emily Vargas. Oh, and Madison Brennan is about to do something stupid. He's desperate enough to try forging documents showing David's transfer was fraudulent. We have someone inside his lawyer's office. Let him try. I left Caldwell Capital feeling the shift in the wind. My phone had 17 missed calls from board members, 43 from reporters, and 1 text from Emily. Injunction granted. They're frozen. News hits in an hour. But the call I returned was from Marcus Thompson, the former CFO. Madison, you need to see this. Bryce just sent an email to all senior staff saying you're attempting a hostile takeover with fraudulent documents. He's ordering them to deny you building access and delete all files you might have accessed. Forward it to Emily, I said. That's destruction of evidence and conspiracy. He just added 5 years to his eventual sentence. At noon, the news broke properly. Corporate coup at Harlow Industries, read the Wall Street Journal headline, Mystery Heir controls majority stake, said Bloomberg. The stock price lurched, dropped 12%, then recovered as word of Caldwell's support leaked. By 3 p.m., the exodus began. Patricia Morse was spotted at her attorney's office with boxes of documents. Janet Sullivan's husband announced she was taking a leave of absence to focus on family. Only Brennan and Dalton remained defiant, holed up in the executive conference room with their lawyers, planning what Victoria had predicted, a desperate forgery attempt. That evening, I met with 7 department heads at a private dining room downtown. They'd reached out through Marcus, wanting to understand what came next. These were David's people, the ones who'd built the company's actual value while the board played political games. "Is it true?" asked Sarah Kim, head of AI development. "You own the company." 51%, I confirmed, "and by Wednesday, the board will be gone." "All of them?" asked James Wright from operations. "Every single one. We're going to rebuild this company the way David envisioned: innovation over extraction, value over vanity." They exchanged glances. Then Sarah spoke for the group. "We're with you, whatever you need." That night, as I reviewed Victoria's financial analysis in my High Ridge office, Emily called with an update. Brennan took the bait. He submitted forged documents to the court, claiming David's signature was faked. Problem is, we have video of David signing, plus the forensic analysis proving the forgery is Brennan's. The FBI will arrest him tomorrow. I looked out at the glittering city, feeling the weight of what David had given me, not just shares or power, but responsibility. The board had seen the company as their personal ATM. David had seen it as legacy. Tomorrow, I'd start showing everyone the difference. "Madison," Emily added, "you realize by Wednesday, you'll be CEO of a $2 billion company." "No," I corrected. "By Wednesday, I'll be CEO of David Harlow's $2 billion company, and that means everything." The Delaware Court of Chancery was a monument to corporate justice, all dark wood and gravity. At 9 a.m. Tuesday morning, I sat beside Emily Vargas as she arranged our evidence with surgical precision. Across the aisle, Brennan's legal team, 5 attorneys from Wright & Associates at $800 an hour, huddled like conspirators. Brennan himself looked haggard. His usual bronze tan faded to gray. The FBI hadn't arrested him yet, but he knew they were coming. Beside him, Bryce Dalton kept checking his phone, probably watching the company's stock price fluctuate with every Twitter rumor. Judge Catherine Hayes entered, a former corporate attorney who'd built her reputation on seeing through boardroom bullshit. "This is an emergency hearing regarding the ownership structure of Harlow Industries," she began. "Mr. Wright, you filed a challenge to the transfer of shares from David Harlow to Madison Cole." Wright stood, his theatrical confidence trying to mask weak arguments. "Your Honor, we contend that Mr. Harlow lacked mental capacity when he signed these documents, a man 3 days from death, heavily medicated, potentially coerced." "Do you have evidence of coercion?" Judge Hayes interrupted. "The circumstances themselves suggest—" "That's not evidence, Counselor, Ms. Vargas." Emily rose like a blade unsheathing. "Your Honor, we have comprehensive proof of Mr. Harlow's mental capacity." She handed the clerk a USB drive. "This video, recorded during the signing, shows Mr. Harlow lucid, deliberate, and explicit in his intentions." The courtroom screen flickered to life. There was David, propped up in his hospital bed but sharp-eyed, speaking clearly. "I, David Marcus Harlow, being of sound mind and body, do hereby transfer 51% of my shares in Harlow Industries to Madison Cole. I do this freely, without coercion, because Ms. Cole represents the future this company needs." The video continued for 12 minutes. David explained his reasoning, discussed specific strategic decisions, even made a joke about the hospital jello. No jury would question his capacity. "Additionally," Emily continued, "we have affidavits from 3 independent psychiatrists who evaluated Mr. Harlow that day, his medical charts showing no psychotropic medications that would impair judgment, and the notarized authentication of 2 witnesses." Judge Hayes reviewed the documents. "Mr. Wright, do you have anything beyond speculation?" Wright shuffled papers desperately. "We've discovered irregularities in the signature." "You mean the forgery your client submitted yesterday?" Emily's voice was ice. "The one where Mr. Brennan attempted to create a false document showing the transfer was invalid." The judge's eyes sharpened. "What forgery?" Emily presented the forensic analysis. "Mr. Brennan submitted this document to the court yesterday at 4:17 p.m., claiming it proved the original was fake. However, forensic analysis shows this document was created Sunday night on Mr. Brennan's personal computer. The metadata is conclusive. That's preposterous. Brennan stood up, his lawyer frantically trying to pull him down. She's manipulating the court. This whole thing is a setup. Mr. Brennan, you'll remain silent or be removed, Judge Hayes warned. She studied the forensic report, her expression darkening. This is a serious allegation, Ms. Vargas. The FBI agrees, Your Honor. They're prepared to file charges for fraud, forgery, and attempting to manipulate federal securities. As if on cue, the courtroom doors opened. 2 FBI agents entered, their presence sending a murmur through the gallery where reporters sat scribbling notes. Judge Hayes made her decision quickly. I find no credible evidence challenging the validity of the share transfer. The shares legally belong to Ms. Cole. Furthermore, I'm issuing an immediate protective order preventing any board member from disposing of assets, destroying documents, or taking any corporate action without Ms. Cole's approval. Your Honor, Wright attempted, the board has a fiduciary duty to shareholders, which they appear to have violated repeatedly. The judge cut him off. Ms. Vargas, do you have additional motions? Yes, Your Honor. We move for immediate access to all corporate facilities and records, plus an emergency audit of all financial transactions from the past 6 months. Granted, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Dalton, I suggest you obtain criminal counsel. Judge Hayes stood. Court adjourned. The FBI agents moved toward Brennan, who backed away, bumping into chairs. This isn't over. Madison, he shouted as they approached. You think you've won? You don't know what you're doing. You'll destroy everything. No, I said quietly, but my voice carried. You already did that. I'm just here to clean up. They arrested him in the courtroom, reading his rights as photographers captured every moment. Bryce Dalton slipped out during the chaos, but Emily had anticipated that. Process servers waited at every exit. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Emily handled them with practiced ease while I stood silent, professional, untouchable. Ms. Cole will address all stakeholders at tomorrow's shareholder meeting, Emily announced. Until then, no comments. But one reporter shouted over the rest. Ms. Cole, what would David Harlow think of all this? I stopped, turned back. David Harlow believed in building things, not tearing them down for parts. Tomorrow, we start building again. That afternoon, the dominoes fell fast. The SEC announced a formal investigation into Harlow Industries' board. Patricia Morse's attorney reached out seeking a plea deal. Janet Sullivan resigned to focus on personal matters. Only Bryce remained defiant, sending an all-staff email calling me a corporate raider and urging resistance. By 5 p.m., his email account was suspended, his building access revoked, and security standing by his office as he packed. He tried to take several boxes of files, evidence of his side deals, no doubt, but security had strict orders. Nothing left the building without my approval. The day ended with me standing in David's office, my office now, looking at the space Brennan had tried to claim. His tacky modern art was already gone. David's photos and awards retrieved from the dumpster and restored to their places. Tomorrow would be the shareholder meeting, the formal transfer of power. But really, it was already over. The king was dead, the queen had risen, and the court had been swept clean. Wednesday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that made everything seem sharper, more real. I entered the Harlow Industries boardroom at 8:55 a.m. 5 minutes before the emergency shareholder meeting. The room was already packed. Institutional investors, fund managers, media, and employees who'd managed to get observer passes. I didn't take the seat reserved for visitors, or even the one marked for senior management. I walked directly to the head of the table, David's chair, and sat down. The murmur that rippled through the room was like distant thunder. Bryce Dalton was already there, flanked by 2 lawyers, his face a mask of barely contained rage. He'd tried everything in the past 24 hours, calling shareholders, threatening lawsuits, even attempting to organize a management revolt. All of it had failed. You don't belong in that chair, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I opened my leather portfolio, extracting the court orders, share certificates, and transfer documents. According to the Delaware Court of Chancery, the SEC, and 51% of shares, I looked up, meeting his eyes. But you're welcome to make your case to the shareholders. Victoria Hale entered at 9 sharp, followed by representatives from Blackstone, Vanguard, and State Street, together controlling another 20%. They took their seats with the precision of a military formation. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, standing now, remote in hand. 3 weeks ago, David Harlow knew he was dying. He also knew this company was being systematically looted by the very people charged with protecting it. The first slide appeared. Harlow Industries' actual financial position. We're hemorrhaging $3 million weekly through fraudulent consulting fees, inflated vendor contracts, and straight embezzlement. Bryce started to object, but Victoria cut him off. Mr. Dalton, you'll have your opportunity to speak. Continue. Ms. Cole. The next slide showed the Crimson Capital emails. Our chief operating officer attempted to sell our AI division to a Chinese competitor for $40 million, the actual value. Click, $212 million, according to 3 independent valuations. Gasps echoed through the room. Several investors were already typing on their phones. Furthermore, I continued, we have evidence of insider trading, SEC violations, and what amounts to corporate treason. The slides kept coming. Brennan's offshore accounts, Patricia's kickback scheme, Janet's campaign finance violations. Each revelation landed like a hammer blow. This is character assassination, Bryce erupted, standing. She's a nobody, a middle manager who manipulated a dying man. I've run operations for 7 years. Yes, I said calmly. Let's discuss your operations. Click. A graph showing operational efficiency declining year over year under his leadership. You've cut R&D by 60% while increasing consulting fees by 300%. You've driven out talent while protecting incompetence. You've turned an innovation company into a personal piggy bank. I pulled up the employee satisfaction surveys, the customer retention rates, the comparative analysis against competitors. The numbers were damning. But I'm not here to dwell on failure, I said, changing the presentation. I'm here to discuss the future. The new slides showed my 90-day plan. Restructuring that eliminated redundancies but protected innovation. Investment in the AI division that Bryce tried to sell. New partnerships with companies David had been cultivating before his death. In 90 days, we'll return to profitability. In 6 months, we'll launch 3 products David greenlit, but the board buried. In 1 year, we'll be the industry leader David always envisioned. Victoria stood. Caldwell Capital moves to remove all current board members effective immediately and install Madison Cole as interim CEO and chairman. Seconded, called the Blackstone representative. This is a coup, Bryce shouted. You can't just... All in favor, Victoria continued, ignoring him. Hands rose throughout the room. The institutional investors, the minor shareholders, even some of the board's supposed allies. The vote was overwhelming. Motion carried, Victoria announced. Mr. Dalton, your services are no longer required. Security will escort you out. Bryce looked around desperately, seeking support that wasn't coming. You're making a mistake. She doesn't know this business. She doesn't have the relationships. The relationships you mean are with criminals and fraudsters, I said quietly. So you're right. I don't have those. I pressed the intercom. Security to the boardroom, please. As they led him out, Bryce turned back one last time. David would be ashamed of what you've done. I pulled up the last slide, a photo of David and me at last year's strategy session, both of us grinning over breakthrough projection charts the board had ignored. Below it, his words from the hospital video, Madison Cole is the future this company needs. David knew exactly what I would do, I said. He counted on it. The room fell silent. Then, slowly, applause began. First from the employees, then the investors, even some reporters. It wasn't celebration, it was acknowledgement. The war was over. Victoria approached as people filed out. Impressive. You didn't just win, you demolished them. They demolished themselves, I corrected. I just documented it. She smiled, that sharp expression that meant approval. The real work starts now. Running a company is harder than taking one. I looked around the boardroom, at David's portrait on the wall, at the city spreading beyond the windows. David trained me for 7 years. I'm ready. That afternoon, I sent a company-wide email from the CEO account. Simple, direct. The past is settled. The future begins now. All hands meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. We have work to do. The responses flooded in. Relief, excitement, hope. The company David built was still there, beneath the corruption and chaos. It just needed someone to clear away the debris. As the sun set over Ravenwood, I stood in my new office, holding David's coffee mug. World's most adequate strategist. Tomorrow, the real strategic work would begin. But tonight, in the quiet of victory, I raised the mug in a silent toast to the man who'd seen this moment coming long before anyone else. The boardroom coup was complete. The revolution had been won without firing a shot, just by revealing the truth and letting it destroy those who'd built their empire on lies. 3 months later, I stood in the same boardroom where I'd once been dismissed like disposable furniture, but this morning was different. The quarterly reports lay before me, and for the first time in 2 years, every metric was green. Revenue up 18%, customer retention at an all-time high. The AI division Bryce had tried to sell for $40 million had just closed a licensing deal worth $30 million annually. The new board, a mix of Victoria's picks and industry veterans who'd respected David, nodded approvingly as I presented the numbers. No more inflated projections or hidden losses, just truth, clean and sharp as winter air. The turnaround is remarkable, said Dr. Sandra Webb, our new independent director. But what I find most impressive is employee morale. The surveys show a 40-point improvement. I thought of the all-hands meeting after the takeover, how I'd stood before 800 employees and told them the looting was over, that their work would matter again. The standing ovation had lasted 3 minutes. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily Vargas. Brennan sentenced, 18 months federal prison, 3 years probation. Thought you'd want to know. I didn't feel satisfaction or vindication, just a quiet sense of justice served. Brennan's empire of theft had crumbled. Patricia Morse had pled guilty to tax evasion. Janet Sullivan's husband had withdrawn from his Senate race, and Bryce Dalton. He was under federal investigation for attempted corporate espionage, his assets frozen, his reputation destroyed. After the board meeting, I walked through the offices, something the old board never did. In the AI division, Sarah Kim's team was celebrating a breakthrough in machine learning that could revolutionize predictive analytics. In marketing, they were planning the launch of products David had championed, but the board had shelved. Energy crackled through the building, the energy of people who knew their work mattered again. That afternoon, I had one last meeting. Marcus Thompson, the former CFO who'd been forced out for asking too many questions, sat across from me in my office. "I want you back," I said simply. "Chief Financial Officer, full restoration of benefits, and a mandate to build the most transparent financial operation in the industry." His eyes widened. "Madison, I'm honored, but David trusted you. You stood up to them when it cost you everything. That's exactly the kind of courage this company needs." He accepted, shaking my hand with visible emotion. Another piece of David's vision restored. As 5 p.m. approached, I found myself alone in the office, looking at David's portrait. We'd had it restored and rehung in the boardroom with a new plaque, David Harlow, founder and visionary, a leader who built for tomorrow, not today. Victoria Hale appeared in my doorway. "Still here. The company won't collapse if you go home before midnight." "Old habits," I said, but I started packing my bag. "You know," Victoria said, studying me with those sharp gray eyes, "I've overseen dozens of corporate transitions. Most are about ego, about proving who's in charge. But you made it about the company, about David's legacy. That's rare. David used to say power isn't about being loud, it's about being effective. Smart man. She paused at the door. There's talk of taking the company public again once we hit the 2-year stability mark. You'd be the youngest female CEO of a publicly traded tech company in Illinois. I'm not doing this for records or recognition. I know, Victoria smiled. That's why you'll probably get both. After she left, I returned to my apartment, the same one-bedroom where I'd plotted the revolution. I'd had offers to upgrade, to move into something befitting a CEO, but this place had been my war room. It felt wrong to abandon it now. I opened my laptop and found an email that made me stop breathing for a moment. It was from David's widow, Margaret, who'd been traveling abroad since the funeral. Madison, I've been following the news. David would be so proud. He saw something in you that others missed. Not just intelligence or skill, but integrity. The company isn't just surviving, it's thriving. You didn't just save his legacy, you elevated it. Thank you. I sat back, feeling the weight of the past 3 months settle into something lighter, something that felt almost like peace. The hostile takeover, the lawsuits, the federal investigations, the complete restructuring. It had all led to this moment. Not a moment of triumph, but of quiet fulfillment. My phone rang. Sarah Kim from AI. Madison, sorry to call after hours, but you need to see this. The breakthrough we celebrated today, it's bigger than we thought. This could change everything. I smiled. I'll be right there. Because that's what David had taught me. The work never really ends. You don't build a company to rest on victories. You build it to keep reaching for the next impossible thing. As I headed back to the office, I passed the conference room where I'd been fired just 3 months ago. The same room where they'd celebrated my dismissal, where they'd thought they'd won. Now Bryce's name was being scrubbed from every company document. Brennan was in federal custody, and I held the power they'd killed to possess. David had been right about everything, but especially about one thing: the most dangerous person in any boardroom isn't the loudest or the most powerful. It's the one who watches, waits, and strikes when the moment is perfect. The revenge was complete, not with noise or fury, but with the quiet satisfaction of justice served cold and precise. The best kind of revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's succeeding so completely that their failure becomes a footnote in your success story. I pushed through the glass doors of Harlow Industries, my company now, ready for whatever came next. Because this wasn't an ending, it was finally, truly, the beginning. Thank you all for listening to this story of corporate justice and sweet revenge. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If you enjoyed Madison's journey from terminated employee to CEO, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts on what you would have done in her position. Your support means everything, and I'll see you in the next story.